Under Standing Order 38, the Opposition Leader MaryLouMcDonald.
And can I extend my congratulations to both deputies on very significant life events and very joyous too. Taoiseach, Harvey Morrison Sherratt died on the 29th of July. Last week I spoke again with his parents Stephen and Gillian. They are heartbroken, shattered by the loss of their beautiful little boy, and we send them again today our condolences and our love. Harvey had a very short life. He was only 9 years old when he passed. And as you know, Taoiseach, he suffered from scoliosis and spina bifida. He waited years for spinal surgery as his condition worsened, and his dad, Stephen, said, "We watched him deteriorate, cry in pain, struggle to breathe, and lose the sparkle in his eye." Harvey was born the year that Taoiseach Simon Harris was appointed Minister for Health. And in 2017, when Harvey was just 1, his parents were told that his ribs were crushing his lungs. That same year, Simon Harris promised that no child would wait more than 4 months for spinal surgery. Over the last 8 years, that promise has been broken again and again and again. Harvey did eventually get his surgery last December, but he had waited far, far too long. He was badly let down. He was, in fact, failed by government. Harvey's story, Taoiseach, is not an isolated case. Such failures are shamefully a hallmark of your government. On Monday, Cork mother Antoinette Burke felt she had no choice but to challenge you publicly. Her daughter Katie has cerebral palsy. She's been left waiting 15 years for the surgery that she needs. Antoinette says that she first contacted your office back in 2010, but her pleas went without action. You said in reply that Katie's case isn't, and I use your word, necessarily emblematic of what families go through in their fight for disability services and treatment, but it is in fact exactly that. Because Antoinette's hurt and anger is recognised very well by the parents of children with scoliosis and spina bifida. It is emblematic of what they have experienced. It's been a litany of broken promises from government. You promised that you would do everything possible to end the scandal of children waiting and waiting for spinal surgery, but today that waiting list is growing. As we speak, 135 children on waiting lists without a date for surgery, up from 108 since the start of the year. 40 of these children waiting 6 months or more, just for a date, mind you, not even for the surgery itself. Last year, you promised that children waiting more than 4 months would be given the option to travel for surgery, but since then, only 7 children have had surgery abroad. It's shockingly low. The government continues to fail these children. Tá bás Harvey Morrison Sherratt Solas Iuru Hepan Rialtas Lani na Tíre. Caithíonn Taoiseach go chur an úlú in cadatá I gceist aige a dhéanamh chun cinnsiú go bhfaigheann leanaí le scólos agus spina bifida na habrádaí atá daoí orthú le prán. Harvey's battle with scoliosis was a race against the clock. It's the same for each one of these children. The longer they wait, the more complex surgeries they will require. The risk of permanent paralysis is very real. The fear of becoming inoperable is very real. Taoiseach, this neglect of children with scoliosis and spina bifida must end and must end now. So I ask you directly today to tell those children, to tell their families what you will do now to ensure that they get the operations that they require urgently.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
First of all, Deputy, at the outset, I want to take the opportunity to offer my deepest condolences to Harvey Morrison Sherratt's family, parents Gillian and Stephen, and no words of condolence or consolation to Harvey's parents. It is an extraordinarily traumatic thing to happen in any family, but in these circumstances, even more traumatic in terms of the experiences that the family and Harvey had with the hospitals and the clinical world itself, and unacceptable. and I know that the Minister met with the HSE and CHI board and has been working on this issue non-stop since she became and was appointed as Minister for Health. The Minister has asked for a multidisciplinary report on the chronology from CHI regarding their involvement in Harvey's care and the key milestones as recorded on the CHI's hospital records. And the HSE CEO has received this draft report in August and has shared that report with Harvey's parents as well as with the Minister for Health. And my understanding is that the Minister for Health and Taoiseach are due to meet Harvey's parents in the near future. I understand fully the anger and the absolute frustration felt by the parents and by other families who do not receive surgical intervention at the right time for their child. I have spoken to Antoinette Burke since I met Antoinette Burke earlier this week. We've arranged to meet. And I don't want to get into discussing individual cases here in public, but clearly the issue there is one of clinical decision-making and a judgment made by clinicians. Clinicians seem to have taken a decision not to do surgery over many years in that case on a clinical basis. Obviously, any parent wants to do the very best for their child. And it seems to me the interaction or the engagement between the clinical decision-making and the position of parents is one that has to be improved. But certainly, the question was put to me, the use of the word emblematic, and I made that point there in the context that if you look at, and I've read the case in relation to Katie and Antoinette, and there's a very clear disagreement in respect of the clinical sort of judgment that consultants have made in that case. That said, I'm going to pursue this, and we've spoken to the CEO of the HSE in relation to this case, and in that case also. And in the broader issue of scoliosis, very significant resources have been allocated by government to CHI. Very significant. There's no point in saying there hasn't been, there has. The issue is the translation of those resources to outcomes and outputs is a key issue for us. There have been a number of reports into CHI. All of you are aware of that. We're not happy with everything that has happened within CHI. We have an issue in terms of one consultant who's been referred in respect of the utilisation of devices and that did not meet the quality mark. We have awaiting a report on governance within CHI. The Health Service Executive has strengthened its service level agreement with CHI and is giving stronger supports to CHI, and that process will continue in terms of underpinning, supporting and creating additional capacity for CHI in the immediate future and in the time ahead.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And that is the direction of travel in respect of services, particularly spinal services at CHI.
As Harvey, Taoiseach waited for the surgery that he required, the curvature of his spine deteriorated from 75 degrees to 130 degrees. I don't know if you saw him. The poor wee child was literally doubled over. He struggled to breathe. He waited and waited, and he's not unique. He's unique now in as much as he's I suppose, emblematic of the wholesale failure of many other children. But TJ Coughlin, he's from Tullamore in County Offaly. He's a great young man. He's 20. He was told at the age of 9 that he needed surgery. He was left waiting till he was 13, and when he turned 13, it was too late. So he's inoperable. He's wheelchair bound. That was catastrophic for that young man's life. You say this is unacceptable. I agree with you. You're reluctant to discuss individual cases in public. I understand that. But remember, these families have no option but to present their pain in very public forums. You point to clinical judgments. You offer up every, it seems to me, excuse under the sun, but you haven't answered my question. What are you going to do about it now? not tread water? What decision will be made now? And can you explain to us how it is that the waiting list is now growing, and how it is that only 7 children have availed of treatment abroad for all of the fine words and promises from yours and successive governments?
Just in response to the point you made there about that I've offered up, or sort of you almost suggest I'm saying and I'm not saying any, the 2 cases that I'm not applying this to those 2 cases now, for example. But there is a fundamental question, and we've all faced it if we're honest, where people will come to us and say, as a parent, I believe my child should get the following intervention or surgery. And if the doctor or the clinician says, we don't believe it's appropriate right now, or we believe the outcomes may not be optimal right now for the child, what are you suggesting? This is a reality on an ongoing basis. It seems to me that we have to really examine that relationship more, and the level of advocacy for the parent in these situations. That's where I think there is a weakness, but it's not a case, because politicians themselves can't arbitrarily and shouldn't arbitrarily sort of just intervene and sort of say, well, it should happen now, irrespective of what the clinical expert is saying. And so I just think we need some degree of consensus on that point.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And then I think the actual how it transpires and the advocacy for parents in that situation is something we should look at.
Thank you,
in terms of stronger advocacy for parents in respect
Taoiseach.
of clinical decision
Deputy Ivana Bacik of the Labour
in terms
Party.
of what we're doing, the treatment abroad, still we have again provided resources. There's an instruction to CHI and to the clinicians to refer.
Thank you,
to
Taoiseach.
refer, and I believe they should be referring on a continuous
Deputy
basis.
Ivana Bacik.
Gurmahagat Can Corla, and I want to welcome everyone back to the House, and welcome in particular Deputy Holly Cairns on your return from maternity leave, and congratulate Deputy Emer Curry. We have Emer Higgins. Sorry.
Already married.
Sorry. Rusty after summer recess. Colleagues, we have. Luckily, I missed that, Taoiseach. Luckily, it's good to be back in the chamber, and we do have serious work to do here over this course of this Dáil term. And Taoiseach, for the government, your long to-do list has lengthened over the summer months. There is so much for you to do. You must build homes. You must address the suffering of all those locked out of secure housing. You must provide basic effective health care, particularly to end the agony of children who are waiting for vital spinal surgeries. And we've seen a shameful increase of nearly 10% since the start of the year, with 135 children now waiting. And I want to join in expressing my deepest sympathies to the parents of young Harvey, Morris and Sherratt. I spoke with Gillian, Harvey's mother, over recent weeks, and I just want to note the dreadful, dreadful trauma that they went through. Taoiseach, I could go on naming government failures, but today I want to focus on one such failure, which is touching every household in the country, creating new inequalities and deepening the plight of families fighting every day to keep it afloat. And I'm talking about the cost of living crisis, because Ireland is a rich country, but for far too many people, it feels poor. And despite high GDP, child poverty rates now match those experienced by families after Fianna Fáil crashed the economy in 2007. So this crisis is really hurting children more than anyone. We're seeing prices rising faster than wages, price gouging which has taken root. We're seeing greedflation, soaring food prices in particular, and energy bills that are among the highest in Europe, housing bills that are among the highest in Europe. The impact on children is immense, Taoiseach. 1/5 of children now living in poverty. That's 225,000 children. Long-term impacts upon those children, upon their parents who are suffering heartbreak as they watch this. And no indication from government that you will use your €9.4 billion to bring struggling families any meaningful respite in October. If indeed you're going to prioritise ineffective tax cuts in this budget, then you must be honest with the public and admit that it will be at the expense of families struggling to stay afloat, at the expense of families worrying how to keep lights on, how to keep the house warm, how to pay for Christmas, how to afford housing. That's your choice in this budget, a political choice you will make. The media say you're not going to do a cost of living emergency package, but Taoiseach, your task is to create a sustainable future. So we need to see reinstatement of targeted energy credits, extension of the ban on disconnections for families, and crucially a second targeted rate of child benefit now, not sometime in the future. We need to see permanent abolition of the means test for carers allowance and a cost of disability payment that's meaningful. So Taoiseach, I'm asking you, will you take the necessary choices in this budget to prioritise ending child poverty and providing supports for struggling households?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
First of all, Deputy, I appreciate the sincerity of the issues that you've raised here in respect of the challenges facing the country. And I would make the point fundamentally to you that since 2019, employment has grown in this country by 506,000 people. 506,000 over 5 years. So we have a strong, resilient economy, and the most effective intervention in terms of poverty or living standards is work and jobs. Okay? And I would argue that the policies that we've advocated here are advantageous to the enterprise economy and the continuation of it, as compared to the policies that at times you and those on the far left who are allied with you now have advocated. And I would make the point that, there has been significant inflation since COVID-19 and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It peaked at around close to 10%. But then, since then, the rates have considerably eased. And living standards actually have improved significantly, with real wages and income increasing by between 3 and 3.5% this year alone. So your nominal wage increase is about 5.5%, inflation is at 2%. But prices are elevated, I acknowledge that, and food inflation is higher at about 5%. And I appreciate your focus on targeting, because we do intend to target in the budget. And we do intend to prioritise the issue of child poverty and those most in need and under considerable pressure. But equally, I think we've got to sustainably work our way through this, because we're now with the third lowest rate of inflation among the 27 European Union countries. And that's something that cannot be ignored as we drive forward in terms of both wage increases and so on, but also then in terms of targeting child support payments. There are mechanisms we can do, which we did in the past, to try and protect those who need protection most, on energy costs, on food pricing costs. But the key is we want to do it in a mainstream way. It's not economically sustainable that as we come out of this high inflation period of the last, we said, 2 or 3 years after COVID, that we would continue doing large standalone cost of living packages. We have to mainstream provision in terms of the various mechanisms we have. So, for example, last year we got rid of, when we eliminated the costs for school books in primary and second level schools. That's a permanent reduction in costs for families and parents and children. Vincent de Paul said in 2023-24 school year, they had a 20-odd% reduction in calls because of that measure alone. Hot school meals is another targeted mainstream provision that we've brought about. And likewise in other areas, we've done the same. So these and that's the approach that I want to take. I welcome your agreement that we need a targeted approach to these issues.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, with respect, I don't need lectures on work and on jobs. We are the party of work. Labour are the party of workers' rights. We have a proud record on job creation, and we absolutely agree with you. Of course, job creation, of course, work is crucial. But I meet people all the time, Taoiseach, and you must meet them too, who tell me they are working hard, getting up early in the morning every day, to use an expression pioneered by one of your government colleagues. And yet they cannot afford to meet basic household costs because of rising prices, rising costs, childcare rates that are, the cost of childcare that's too high, the cost of housing, all of the costs that they have to meet, they simply cannot do even though they are working. And Taoiseach, this phenomenon of the working poor is something that your government has failed to take effective measures to address. And we're not seeing any indication, just a few weeks out from the budget, that there's going to be any measures adopted in this budget that will help families who are struggling in this way, who simply cannot find a way to meet their household costs. And people are looking for reassurance from you. We are looking, Taoiseach, for some indication that you're going to build that sustainable safety net for families and households that are struggling, and that you're going to offer them some hope in this budget that they'll be able to meet their rising costs.
To respond.
I have indicated that we're going to do that, and I said to you prior to the summer recess that we would target our resources as opposed to universal allocations. And we have, through our social protection frameworks, we have mechanisms that will enable us to do that in terms of the various payments and so on that we can increase. But we will prioritise in respect of the child poverty question. We will prioritise in terms of disability and in terms of the additional costs that families with people who are disabled and so on have to incur. And we will seek to alleviate that. And we're conscious of the programme for government commitments we've made in respect of the carers allowance also. But the budget fundamentally is an investment in the future of the country. And we are prioritising capital investment. And we do need to catch up on infrastructure. This year alone, last year alone, close to 100,000 increase in our population. Very significant increase in population in this country over the last 2 to 3 decades. And that is creating pressure undoubtedly on services and on infrastructure.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
So we are investing in the future, in the water, energy, grid, housing, and that would be a key part of the budget.
Thank you. Now, Social Democrats, Deputy Holly Cairns.
As this is my first time addressing the Dáil since my maternity leave, I hope you'll indulge me in saying a few thank yous. First of all, I want to thank my colleagues in the Social Democrats for their ongoing support, and I would like to say a special thank you to our Deputy Leader, Cian O'Callaghan, for stepping in during my maternity leave. I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to the people of Cork South West for re-electing me. And Ceann Comhairle, I would also like to acknowledge the loss this weekend of Councillor Patrick Gerard Murphy in our area and convey my condolences to his family. He was an outstanding disability advocate and he worked tirelessly for the Bantry area. He will be sorely missed. Taoiseach, today I want to speak to you about disability. Despite all of the promises that we heard during the election, disabled people and their families are still being let down. During the election, you said that disability would be, and I quote, a top priority for your government. You also said your government would lead a step change in the level and scale of support for people with disabilities. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Nearly 16,000 children now overdue an assessment of need. Essential therapies and supports still almost non-existent, and hundreds of children are still left in agony waiting for spinal surgeries. The harsh truth is, and Taoiseach, I take no pleasure in saying this, the only things that disabled people are guaranteed by your government are broken promises and a waiting list. Despite the 2017 promise that no child would wait more than 4 months for scoliosis treatment, children like Harvey, Morris and Sharat have suffered years of delays, trauma and pain. Harvey waited years for the care that he needed, only receiving surgery last November when the curve in his spine had reached 130 degrees, causing his rib cage to twist around his lungs and heart, restricting his breathing. After Harvey tragically passed away, his mother said all he wanted was his iPad, hunky-dories, the odd lollipop, and timely access to healthcare. Harvey's parents, Gillian and Stephen, and thousands of parents like them around this country have had to watch their children go for years without the intervention that they need, feeling helpless and hopeless in the face of an uncaring system, knowing that every day means their children are further at risk of never reaching their full potential. Taoiseach, children are denied services and prevented from reaching their full potential at every step of the way. We're talking about the difference between a child being able to learn to speak or not, being able to communicate. The difference for somebody being able to live an independent life or not. When disabled people become adults, any meagre supports they had vanish.
Thank you.
We have the lowest employment rates for disabled people in the EU, and 1 in 5 disabled people in Ireland live in poverty. It is nothing short of shameful.
Thank you.
Taoiseach, will you ensure that children waiting on spinal surgeries will finally get the treatment that they need? And can you at least acknowledge that this government is not living up to the commitments that it made?
Thank you, Deputy. Indulged.
Well, first of all, I take the opportunity to welcome you back, Deputy, and looking forward to our continued engagements. And I think we both share, a love of West Cork, and I think the people of West Cork, in terms of their representatives, in terms of, have vote in terms of quality and calibre and so forth. I'm going to miss Deputy Cian O'Callaghan, and I want to thank Deputy O'Callaghan for his forensic engagement over the last while. And may I also thank you for your tributes to Councillor Patrick George Murphy, who a colleague of ours, and we're in deep sadness because Patrick George was a wonderful individual. And the definition of what public representation at local level means, a man of great deep insight, commitment and care and compassion, and great courage and bravery as well in terms of his own personal life and as a public representative. When we said that disability is a top priority of this government, it is. And I accept fully that there are shortcomings in respect, to say the least, in some areas, particularly in spinal surgery, particularly in the area of assessment of need and in terms of the availability of therapies. On the other hand, it is important to create the other side of the narrative as well, of unrelenting investment in additional needs, particularly, for example, in education over the last number of years, and exponential growth in services. And if you take education alone now, the state investment is about 2.9 billion in 2025. That's 48% of an increase since 2020. That's over a quarter of the entire Department of Education budget. We now have 23,000 special needs assistants working in our schools, up 43% in the last 5 years. We added 1,600 SNAs this year alone, 21,000 special education teachers. Again, the special classes have doubled, the number of special classes, to 3,700 plus. We've had 16 new special schools established in the last number of years, 407 new special classes sanctioned for 25-26. Now, that represents and reflects investment. It still isn't enough. Our population, as I said earlier, is growing very significantly. And if you look at the last two censuses, the most recent one showed a marked increase in the numbers identifying with a disability, both in terms of children and in terms of adults. And that means we have to not just increase resources, but also systemically change as well. And to be fair to Minister Helen McEntee and Minister Michael Moynihan, they're already working to change the system in respect of children with additional needs and their families applying for places in schools in terms of the centralised application system being piloted, and in terms of now being brought forward the time to apply Deputy 4 months Cairns. Earlier, so that we have a better lead in time to the subsequent September. I'll come back on the other points later.
Taoiseach, can you tell us about increased investment and that disability is a priority? But even when it comes to something relatively simple, if we use the example of recognising the cost of disability and addressing it, your government manages to somehow spectacularly miss the mark. So, the 2021 report calculated the additional cost of disability to be at €236 per week. What was the government's response to that? A one-off payment of €400, as if having a disability is some kind of a one-off minor inconvenience. According to the RSI and IREC, the cost of disability is now up to €875 per week. One-off payments aren't only grossly insufficient, they're insulting. Tens of thousands of disabled people live in poverty, with nearly 76% of disabled people in Ireland at risk of poverty. Taoiseach, you say disability is a priority, but you've published a national disability strategy that lacks any ambition, lacks a budget and lacks any timelines.
Thank you, Deputy.
We have more than enough reports. What we need is action. One question. Can you tell us, will you introduce a cost of disability payment in the budget?
Thank you, Deputy.
First of all, I think your critique of the human rights strategy, the National Human Rights Strategy for Disabled Persons, is wrong. And there was significant participation of people with disabilities in the formulation, delivery and announcement of that strategy, and who enthusiastically participated in that. And structures have been created to follow through. So I think that's a kind of a cynical, poor response by you in terms of what was a genuine... No, sorry,
Deputy, it's not a back and forth.
No, I'm just saying, I met with the people at the launch of the strategy. I've created a disability unit in my own department to drive change, and we're going to do it over the lifetime of this government, and we're going to do it. And it's right across the board. In terms of a cost of living, it's not simple, and you know that. But there will be measures in the budget to help families who, with disabilities in terms of income supports. There will be measures in the budget in that respect.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now we move to Deputy Brian Stanley.
Thanks, Sean Cole, and can I join as well in welcoming Deputy Holly Cairns back to the Dáil. Congratulations, Holly, and congratulations also to Deputy Emer Higgins. Life will never be the same again. Many years of happiness and joy to yourselves and your partners in the years to come. Taoiseach, the issue I'm raising, which is the situation regarding renters, the out-of-control rental market, so-called rental market that we have. Average rents in a lot of areas now are over €2,000. Recent reports have shown how they're skyrocketing. The recent Residential Tenancy Board showed an average annual rent increase of 5.5%. In Counties Laois, that's over 10%, Taoiseach. There's been 8 successive quarters in a row where there have been significant increases in the county. Families and workers are under significant pressure. Notices to quit are on the increasing numbers of them from rack renting landlords who are getting vacant possession because they're getting ready for next March, when there will be effectively no rent controls on new tenancies and no new builds. Some landlords are telling tenants that regardless of whether there is a new tenancy or not, rents will go up. So it's a free-for-all. And as examples for that, I want to raise with you the case of Alan and Denise. Alan and Denise are just over the limit for social housing and have children. He's a retained firefighter. They're in private rented accommodation for 9 years. 4 months ago, the landlord told them the rent was going up by 50%. 50% increase in South Laois. He done that the first week in June. But of course he knew what he was doing, because on the 20th of June, the 2% cap came in. So a lot of landlords got in early. Their income is less than $40,000 a year. They have no way forward. He's 49 years of age. They have no access to social housing because they're over the limit for social housing. They have no access to cost rentals because they don't exist yet in Laois. And there is no affordables. And he won't get an affordable housing loan in any case. The case of Darren, a single man with one child, he's moved from one rent pressure zone to another. He's on $460 a week. He needs a car for work. He pays maintenance. He has a child. He's paying 77 in HAP rent, and he's paying €120 a week rent to a landlord. Some workers, Taoiseach, are paying half and more than half their income in rent. I don't know if you know that or not. But vacant possession and evictions are easy, because the grounds in your legislation show that if the landlord is facing hardship, if they're required for a family member, or, God forbid, if they're going to renovate the place, a coat of magnolia paint will even do it to get vacant possession. So the question is, do you recognise that workers and families are under enormous pressure of renting? And we're coming up to a budget time, and I want you to address this. It's way beyond what people can afford. Will you halt your plans for March to introduce, a complete free-for-all in relation to new tenancies? And will the government ramp up the supply of cost rental and affordable housing to purchase?
Thank you, Deputy Stanley. Taoiseach.
First of all, Deputy, in terms of the rental market more generally, we're not creating a free-for-all. Absolutely not. We're creating a national rent pressure zone, ultimately be the entire country. But the bottom line is we need more supply of houses. and we significantly need substantial increase in the supply of housing. That's the key, in my view, because without additional supply, we are going to have a very challenging rental market. You did indicate a case of 50%. That sounds illegal to me. And I don't know whether the landlord is registered with the RTB or not, but I don't have the specifics of the case, but you can forward it to us afterwards. But the bottom line is that we have, as you know, reformed the RPZs, and the objective there is to create the opportunity for greater private sector investment in the private rental market to get more apartments built. That is important in terms of choice and greater access for people to apartments. But we've done it in a way which continues to protect tenants. And there's very substantial protections have gone in for tenants over the last 5 years compared to what was there before. And that has to be acknowledged. And I do accept fully that costs are high. And that's why we brought in the rent tax credit to be of assistance to renters in terms of meeting the increases and meeting the cost of renting itself. And the reforms that we announced on the 10th of June will strengthen the rights of new and existing tenants in Irish society. So it's not a return to a free for all. They were informed by the Housing Agency Review, who did an analysis of the rental market for us, in particular of the rent pressure zones, and it made recommendations which we followed through on, and all of the House wanted us to follow through on the Housing Commission's recommendations, which were, and it's in that context that the Housing Agency Review followed through and that. And so there's a national cap now of 2% on existing rents and so forth. So I don't know how someone can go up by 50%, but we'll see. If you can forward me the details of that. And as I said, we have the rent tax credit has been continued. And again, we'll deal with that in the forthcoming budget also. And then we've provided a range of measures in terms of security for renters and in terms of, and there's a full list of those which I will not go through. But fundamentally, and even this year alone, on top of the estimate for 2025, we've allocated a further $1 billion to the housing estimate. We're up to about $7.5 billion. By the end of 2025, will have been spent on housing. That is a huge state intervention, very significant. We do need more private sector investment in the rental market, and particularly in building new apartments. And we've taken measures, not just on the RPZs, but also in terms of apartment standards and other issues to attract further investment in on the private side to balance the state investment.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
We're going to continue with that agenda.
Deputy Stanley.
Thanks, Taoiseach. The concern that I have is that what's going to happen in towns like Mountmellick, Abbeyleix, Mountrath, Portlaoise and towns like that. And could I just say to you about increase in supply? You were in government in 2004, 5 and 6 when supply increased. In fact, 96,000 were built in 2006. And you will recall in those years that rents skyrocketed. So there's not necessarily a correlation between an increase in supply and an increase in the supply of housing. Let's get that. The evidence is there to show that. And you will remember that, so do I. So what I'm asking you is this, is that in relation to vacant possessions and evictions, there won't be a need for evictions and no-fault evictions. They're banned, I get that. But there will be fault evictions because people will not be able to pay the rent, and that's what they're telling me. The RTB report shows that. In relation to supply, there was an increase of 45,000 tenancies in the 6 years up to 2023. But you will have noted yesterday, despite your strategy, that the number of planning permissions have actually fallen. You will note that yesterday from the report yesterday. So do you recognise that workers and families are under enormous pressure? Will you halt your plans and do something to save tenants for March? Because I'm telling you this, that people leave tenancies for different reasons. And when they become vacant, they are faced with a free-for-all. Your 2% is irrelevant. It's on paper. And landlords will completely ignore that, and they can ignore it because your legislation says they can ignore it.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
No, I disagree with that, Deputy. And you've mentioned the correlation between supply and price. Are you suggesting we don't?
Deputy, you weren't interrupted. Allow the Taoiseach to speak. Thank you.
In terms of supply and its relationship with pricing, I mean, I tell you one thing for certain. If we don't substantially increase supply, rents will go through the roof. The scarcity involved will increase in any new tenancies that come along. So the bottom line, like, let's not. I take it we're all agreed with more supply, and that's a fundamental. Look, you're not. It's not your turn, Deputy. Your party had your turn. Are we agreed on that? We need more supply. No.
Deputy.
Okay. Secondly, we have very comprehensive and significant protections there for tenants. Yes, the RTB has a function and an obligation and a role to enforce and ensure the protection of tenants in these scenarios, and that fairness applies on all sides in respect of tenancies. And you've referenced it yourself in terms of evictions and so on like that. We have brought in those kind of protections.
Thank you.
And I think we're going to, I think with the measures that we've taken so far, and hopefully with some further measures, that we will be in a position to get greater traction in terms of building apartments.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Time is up, and now we move to other members' questions. I call